Do you ever perceive that it's holding you back?
No, I perceive it as serving the customer.
Our customers have driven over 700 million hands-free miles with Super Cruise without a single accident attributed to the technology. I led autopilot. You can't say that for autopilot.
So we should expect new gas cars will not have smart home projection.
As we get to a major rollout, I think that's the right expectation, yes.
Hello, and welcome to Decoder. I'm Nilay Patel, editor-in-chief of The Verge, and Decoder is my show about big ideas and other problems. We've got a special episode today. I'm talking to General Motors CEO Mary Barra and new GM Chief Product Officer Sterling Anderson about a lot of big news the company just announced, including a Google Gemini-powered AI assistant that's coming to new cars, an entirely new hardware and software platform coming to the Escalade IQ in 2028, along with true Level 3 autonomous driving, a new home battery business, and a new robotics division. I think you're going to like this one. Mary Barra, you are the chair and CEO of GM, and Sterling Anderson, you're the chief product officer at GM. Welcome to Decoder.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
I am very excited to talk to you both today. There is a lot of news to discuss. I'm going to just go through the list and see if I get it all. You have the introduction of Google Gemini-powered assistant in the cars in 2026, a next-generation hardware and software platform that will come first on the Escalade IQ in 2028. That will enable the next generation of Super Cruise, which will let you have eyes-off driving, additional hands-off driving in the Escalade IQ. There's a new robotics division, which is a big bet, and then new batteries and new home energy solutions. All of that is coming in the context of what I would call huge changes in the car market, the end of the EV tax credits, tariffs that are upending the global supply chain, what appears to be a brewing trade war with China over rare earth metals, which are essential to all of these plans. Did I miss anything?
Well, we've been pretty busy, so I think you captured most of it, but I would say in the midst of all of that, we have a great product portfolio of both internal combustion engine vehicles and electric vehicles, and the customers are responding very well to it. So, one of the things our team has developed over the last handful of years is the ability to be very resilient and agile to respond to all these challenges. And so I'm really proud of the team. I'm proud of the vehicles and the services we have today. And what we're going to talk about is where we're headed. So it's an exciting time at General Motors.
Yeah. And when it comes to all that news and what you're describing there is what I call decoder bait, right? This is how are we running a company of this size to make all these bets and be flexible? And then Sterling, I don't know if they warned you, I have some very nerdy questions for you.
That's great.
And very specific feature requests.
Nerdier the better.
About my Cadillac Vistic in particular.
Yeah, I love it.
So we'll come to that as well. But Mary, I want to start with GM and some of these bets that you've been making for a while now. I would say that it's been almost 5 years that you've been aggressively positioning GM for an electric and autonomous future. Just today, though, GM announced a $1.6 billion charge in the third quarter against changes in the market, falling EV sales. So I'm curious, just big picture, how would you describe where you want GM to be and how far you are along that journey and how things have changed that in ways you were expecting and not expecting?
Sure. Well, I would say, first of all, it's being very customer focused and making sure we have great products with the right design, the right quality, the right features, performance, the right software and services that we can put on top of that customers want to buy. So we start there, and that's where we want to head. From an EV perspective, we still believe in EVs, and I consider them to be our North Star. But clearly, when you have a dramatic shift that we're seeing in the regulatory environment in the United States and potentially other places, as well as a very substantial change in the consumer tax credit, that's going to change buyer behavior. When you think about vehicles, they're either the most important or the second most important purchase that a customer makes. I mean, it's very significant, and we get to be a part of that with our consumer. So as we look at these changes, we need to make adjustments. But we're going to meet the customer where they are, whether they want a great ICE vehicle or they want an EV. The adjustment that we made today from the charge was really reflecting what we believe now will be a slower EV adoption, but we still have a great portfolio of award-winning EVs that we're going to be offering. And so we're going to meet the customer where they are, but when you have that dramatic a change that happens in that short a period of time, you have to make adjustments to run the business well.
Let me ask you about that specifically. Obviously,
Sure.
The tax credit going away, it drove a lot of EV adoption. I am one of those people. I rushed and made sure that I bought this car before that tax credit went away. I'll tell you, the dealer I bought my car from, he gave me a great deal, and he told me I will move as many EVs as I can because that's how I get allocations on gas-powered Escalades, and in particular, I think the CTSV Blackwing. That's the thing he wanted. He's like, I got to move this many EVs to get allocations on that car where I'm going to make a lot of money. That's all changing, right? That table has been flipped. The tax credit's gone away. We don't know what the market's going to do. Are you taking the $1.6 billion charge preemptively, or have you already seen the change such that you're taking that charge?
Well, I think when we look at one of the things that we made an adjustment already was the fact that we were planning to have one of our factories in Lake Orion, Michigan, be an electric plant. And when we looked at the shift and what's happening with tariffs, we decided that we were going to expand the capacity because right now in some, for instance, full-size utilities, we can't build enough. The demand is so strong. And so we're going to use that plant. So once you make a change like that, that's something that already has happened. I don't think we're going to know for sure what true EV demand is until next year because, like you and many others, there was definitely a pull ahead for people who wanted to be able to have access to the $7,500 tax credit. So we'll see potentially a little bit lower in the fourth quarter. We don't know yet. And as we get into next year, we're going to see that. But again, when you talk about $7,500 on a vehicle, that's pretty substantial. We do expect, and I think the industry expects, and the external forecasters believe that we're going to see slower EV growth. But I think the important thing is we think we'll still see growth.
Can I put that in the context of new versus used cars? I see what's going on with new cars, right? And most new EVs are leased, and every company, including GM, played games with residuals on leases to bring those prices down on top of the tax credit. And then I look at the used market, and I see EV depreciation is out of control. And there's just, honestly, like financially, buying a used EV might be the only smart car purchase you should make today. That's not growth in new sales, but it's obviously more people coming into EVs as owners, as having the experience. Do you think that will have any effect on how you market and sell your new EVs?
Well, first, I would say I don't think we played games with residuals. I mean, General Motors has been very disciplined for more than a decade about understanding what pricing does and when you make dramatic changes in pricing, what that does to the residuals. And then it takes almost a new generation of that vehicle to get the residuals to be where they're at. So we manage that very, very carefully because we want to make sure the people who buy our vehicles keep that value. Now, when someone leases, that then becomes the leaser, or for our in our case, many of our vehicles are bought through GM Financial. So, but we look at that as well because it's still something very important. But again, I think it's too soon to tell. I mean, generally, what we see, there's a new car buyer, and then there's people who buy used vehicles, and so we're just going to have to see what the equation is. But I think one of the things you're getting at is the consumer is very rational. So I think they're going to be looking across the board.
If I can add one thought there, and Nilay, you're now in a Vistic, so getting a little more of this experience with some of these cars. For many, getting over the hump of that kind of initial activation energy of being comfortable with an EV, being comfortable with the range, getting comfortable with setting up level 2 charging in their home and these other things, I think there is incremental value to, as you say, kind of the penetration that we get in the secondhand market for people that get comfortable with these vehicles. They are better cars. They're better on a number of dimensions. And as that comfort grows, I do hope that it's value accretive to kind of future purchases.
Well, and to your point, Sterling, we have already seen with our consumer feedback or customer feedback that once they own an EV, because of those benefits, they very much are likely to buy another EV. So, but we're still in early days. And again, I think we're going to see as charging infrastructure gets more broadly or more widespread across the country, I think we're going to continue to see EV adoption grow. But the great thing or the beautiful thing from a General Motors perspective is we've got a vehicle, whatever they choose. And I think that puts us in a very unique position as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, in one way, and don't take this the wrong way, but in one way what you're saying here is what I've heard about EVs for a long time. They are better cars. You don't have to do the maintenance. They have instant torque, right? Like you charge them at home and you never have to think about going to a gas station again in your life. Those have been the arguments for some time. I think in the pandemic, a lot of companies reacted to what seemed like infinite demand for the Tesla Model 3. They could not sell as many as they were making. And you made a lot of bets, right? And those bets right now are paying off. I would say my car feels like the payoff of a big bet you all made some time ago. It is a mature platform. It's a great car. I have no complaints with it really. I mean, I do, but we'll come to those, Sterling. Just you wait. But it's very hard to nitpick that car. But then the whole market changed around you, right? That infinite demand for Tesla products is no longer infinite, even for Tesla. They're doing sales. They're doing pricing changes. And we're seeing the tax credits go away. Do you think it's your gas vehicles that are going to carry you through this period of uncertainty? Or do you think the EV sales are actually going to hold their own?
Well, again, I think it's too soon to tell, and I've been in this job too long to make predictions like that. We'll see. We're well positioned either way. But I think an important point is even in this period over the last 2 years, General Motors was taking share. We were growing share and continuing to have vehicles that were highly rated year after year and model after model. So again, we're well positioned. We'll meet the customer where they are, but I don't think that it's dramatically going to change. I think our internal combustion engine vehicle business has been important. We're still on a journey to get to like profitability from an EV perspective. So we're going to continue on that journey, and we're investing in the technology that takes cost out of the vehicle while taking nothing away from the customer. So we're going to be in a good position there as well.
California Governor Gavin Newsom says GM sold out to the Trump administration over this tax credit. I'm just going to read you the quote. Mary Barra sold us out, eliminating Ronald Reagan's work, eliminating the progress we made under the California Air Resources Board in 1967. The Republicans rolled that back this year under Donald Trump's leadership, but the American automobile manufacturer allowed that to happen. GM led that effort. Do you have a response to that?
Well, I would say we worked tirelessly for more than a year trying to make sure that the states that were following CARB, we have worked with CARB for decades. But we got to a point where when you looked at what was required for model year 26, and as you know, those sales start in calendar year 25, those states following CARB needed to get to a 35% EV penetration. The consumer wasn't there. We worked with the different states, we worked with CARB, but it got to a point where we were weeks away from not being able to sell customers the cars they wanted because the penalties were so strict in some cases. So we have always consistently, and I think for my entire term here as CEO, been really working hard to get one national standard. Because we have really strict regulations across the board, and to have varying by state makes it even more complicated. So we've always said we needed harmonized standards, and that's what we've always worked toward. In this situation, there were other automakers who equally supported getting the CRA passed. I think, though, apparently I was the one singled out there, but I still stand by what we did because we worked for a long time, and I think there were a lot of governors and other lawmakers who were relieved that CRA passed because we were approaching a situation that could have an impact on jobs, on plants not being able to produce, because literally we would have been limited in what we could sell.
On the one hand, the Trump administration made it easier for you to sell the cars you have and the cars you're making today without what you're describing as the regulations that would have prevented you from doing that. On the other hand, we're talking about the tax credits going away, and we're talking about costs rising for the automotive industry because of Trump's tariff policies. Does that feel like a holistic conversation with the Trump administration about the automotive industry in America, or is it all things happening at once? Because that, from the outside, it feels like no one's talking to each other.
We are talking a lot to the administration on many aspects, on making sure that we have a strong manufacturing base in this country, making sure that we have strong automotive companies, American automotive companies, getting a level playing field. When you look at the tariff, what's happening in tariffs, I've long said, let us have a level playing field and we'll compete. But we have not had a level playing field with many countries for many, many years. And so as you make those changes, yes, it can be disruptive, and we're making adjustments so we can compete in that market. When you look at the change from a regulatory environment, again, we don't set those changes. We just try to help people understand. It was very clear the Trump administration felt strongly about wanting consumers to choose versus being regulated into having to buy a certain vehicle. I'm a big believer in consumer choice. And even for years, I've been saying, I want to get enough EVs out there that are great EVs, that a consumer chooses it because they love it and it's the car they want to drive. Once you get into regulations driving consumer behavior, you're already in a difficult place. So yes, has a lot happened this year? Absolutely. But I think it's what we do and respond. It's, we responded to COVID, we responded to the semiconductor shortage, and I'm really proud of the team. This has been some change, but we were going to need change regardless because the regulatory environment was getting in front of the consumer. And largely the charging infrastructure hadn't built up as much as I think people thought it would be or where it would advance by the time some of these regulations kicked in. So to me, I look at tariffs as one about a level playing field and having a strong manufacturing capability in this country. I think the regulatory change was about consumer choice. We want to just do great vehicles that people choose, and that's why I still say EVs are a North Star. And I've had many conversations with the administration and with the president talking about that I fundamentally believe EVs will continue to grow over time, albeit a little bit more slowly because we don't have the consumer tax credit anymore, but because they're great vehicles.
Do you think that consumers are going to feel the impacts of the tariff policies on GM or other car makers the way that it feels like we just ordered clothes for a wedding and we got hit with tariff charges by DHL at JFK. Like, is that going to come to consumers in a real way in the auto industry? Or are you managing against that? Because we're already talking about prices going up in other ways.
Right. We're looking at how do we maintain our focus on affordability? How do we continue to drive efficiency? How do we comply with tariffs to make sure that we aren't paying a big tariff bill? And then we're also continuing to communicate with the administration and members of the cabinet so they understand some of the unintended consequences of some of the policies. And I have to say, they've been incredibly receptive to and really have become students of the industry to make sure they understand the ramifications. And they've made adjustments to make sure we're working toward having strong manufacturing in this country and having a level playing field.
Can I just ask you one more question about the broader car market? And then I want to do the Decoder questions, which I think will lead into all of the news here. You're talking about affordability. We're talking about your costs rising with tariffs, consumer costs rising as credits go away, all these sorts of things. Broadly, the car market is as K-shaped as the rest of the economy. I think I saw a report today that said average car prices are headed north of $50,000 while defaults on financing are at an all-time high. That's not a good split, right? The cars are getting more expensive than ever and people are not able to pay their bills. How are you thinking about that? That actually a lot of people can't afford these ever more expensive cars. And when I hear from our readers, whenever we publish about a new EV, the first thing that people say in our comments is, well, that's too expensive. How are you thinking about that?
Well, that's why I'm extremely proud of what we have from a Chevrolet perspective. Whether you're looking at the Chevrolet Trax and Trailblazer, that are internal combustion engine vehicles and start at around $20,000 and then go up, or you're looking at now the Bolt we are bringing back that we just announced will be at that $30,000 level. The Equinox is mid-30s. So I think we're offering great choice for the consumer in a very affordable price range with great vehicles that have beautiful design, incredible safety. I mean, if you look at the screen on the Equinox EV, it's a large screen with great safety features. And so I look at it and say, I understand what the broad industry trends are, but when I look at it from a General Motors perspective, we're doing extremely well in these entry level segments in both ICE and EV, as well as we're doing, I think, really strong work at the top end. And we keep seeing some consumers are saying they want a more premium truck. They want a more premium SUV. And so we're meeting that demand when you think about a Denali on the Yukon or the Cadillac Escalade and Escalade IQ. But then we also have great vehicles that are very affordable. So we're a full portfolio manufacturer, and I'm very proud that we can meet the customers where they are.
Yeah, there are not many car companies that have a range from $20,000 to, I believe that the most expensive is this Cadillac Celestiq at $300,000. That's the full range.
Yeah, and that's
I
a
will
very
warn you,
customized
Sterling,
vehicle too.
We are going to look at what's on the screen very soon. Trust me, it's coming. Let me ask you the Decoder questions. GM, I think people understand it as nameplates, right? There's GM and GMC and Chevy and Cadillac and Buick and all the rest. How is GM structured as a company, as an operating company? How is it structured? Is it just the divisions and the brands, or are you more functional than that?
I think we're more functionally, and Sterling is responsible for our products globally as the chief product officer, because we leverage that to get the scale. But then we also understand for the different brands what we need to do to make sure we're delivering on that brand promise, whether it's true luxury with a Cadillac, value, but the unique American heritage that Chevrolet has. Buick is premium and has been doing very well in growing, and then GMC, which is a very premium truck. So each of our 4 brands are very specific for what they mean to the customer. So we make sure when we do a portfolio of vehicles, or when we're doing, for instance, full-size trucks, that we understand what it means to be a Chevy, means to be a GMC or a Cadillac. We look at all of that, and so it's really a cross-functional team working together to make sure we deliver on that. And then we do have regional sales and marketing team that really understand the customer in each of our markets. So at broad brush, at the most senior level, that's, I would say, the way the company is organized.
So walk me through that in a little more specificity. What you're describing, it sounds complex. So you have centralized product development. We're going to make a pickup truck. And then you have brand expressions of but one pickup truck. How do they decide what goes where? Is that the brands themselves have teams that get to do it? Do they have their own designers? How does that work?
Well, I would say, first of all, Sterling and I just came from design, and we were looking at a platform that's going to have both a Cadillac and a Chevrolet. And, so there's the brands in the studio, they have people dedicated to Chevrolet and then a different team that's dedicated to Cadillac. But then we also have product planning people that are looking at what is the technology roadmap, what features and functionality needs to be on that vehicle? How are we going to make sure that we achieve how we want to go to market from a price perspective, getting back to that affordability or that true luxury? And so, but it's done with people. For instance, the brand is managed for the globe as well. So it's not like a Chevy in South America has a total different team managing it than a Chevrolet in the United States or in another part of the world. So it's not really complex. It actually simplified it. And we get what is so important in the auto industry is scale. Because once you have scale, that's how you get to give the customer more than they think they would get for a price point, because we're leveraging General Motors scale. And I'm very proud that we sell more vehicles in this country than anyone else. We're extremely strong in South America. We have a great business in the Middle East. We still have a significant business in China. And leveraging that scale is one of the things that allows us to keep vehicles affordable or give people more functionality than they expect.
That's actually one of the things I'm most interested in is there's the U.S. market and sort of the markets that are related to the U.S. market or have similar tastes and desires, similar brands competing. And then there's the Chinese market. And, I watch a lot of car YouTube, for better or worse. And car YouTubers are increasingly saying, look at these Chinese EVs. They're better than the cars that we can get here. United States protectionism is keeping us from having these cars, and then they go through all the quirks and features of the cars. And I think that's great because I really enjoy watching car YouTube. If I was in your seat, I'd say, oh boy, the stuff we have to do to compete in China is radically different than the things we have to do to compete in the United States. How do you manage that split across this portfolio of brands?
Well, for China vehicles in China, so our business for China, already you have to use technology in China for China because that's the requirement in China. So already there's a little bit of a fence around that. There also right now is an incredible price war going on. There needs to be a sorting. You can't have over 100 different OEMs in a country trying to compete, especially now as they're competing on price. And I think if you read what's happening in country right now, there's a lot of change happening. I would also say there's overcapacity in China, which is causing, I think from a business perspective, exporting to other markets. But they're also doing it in many cases highly subsidized. So we are regularly regularly benchmarking our Chinese competitors like we do global competitors, understanding where they're putting features, where they're not, what they're adding. But I would also say we've got to meet the regulations in this country. The safety standards are different. There's different emission standards. And there's also standards and requirements around connectivity. Like I mentioned, for instance, autonomy in China is you need to use a system that's Chinese-based because the country actually controls the maps. So there's also regulations or executive orders, I can't remember exactly, but there's rules we have to follow of what we're able to use in country. So there's already differences. So just to look, from what the offering is and not understanding what the rules of the different markets are going either way, I think is a very big simplification. And I don't know, Sterling, if you have anything to add with what you saw at your time at Tesla or just even when you were at Aurora and understanding what markets you could compete.
Yeah, a couple of quick things. One, so as Mary says, we're in China. We work through JVs in China. I believe last year we were the only non-China OEM JV to have grown.
Early this year.
In share.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So our China business is actually performing quite well in China. As Mary said, as we benchmark across these vehicles, if we strip away the subsidies and the other support that the Chinese government is providing to many of these players, we compare favorably on most dimensions with our EVs. In particular, we've got some work that we're doing around a next generation electric vehicle and electric vehicle architecture that compares very favorably to what we see. So we do. I'm impressed by what they've done. I'll start with that. I think we don't want to be resting on our laurels that way. I think there's more that we can be doing, but we're on it. We recognize very acutely kind of the speed at which an industry that is so heavily subsidized tends to move, and we don't intend to wait for it.
And I think, Sterling makes a really great point. So we are regularly looking at how do we make every part of our business more efficient. We don't control what the government policies are. It's evident by what's changed this year. So we just need to have the best product that we have as efficiently as possible. And that's what we're focused on every day.
We just had Ford CEO Jim Farley on the show. My friend Joanna Stern interviewed him I was on leave, so she filled in for me. That was very nice of her to do. He is very clear that BYD makes a better car than Ford, right? He drove around in BYD for a while and publicly announced, this is better than our car. On our show, he said to Joanna, we're going to have a better car for you when your Mach-E lease is done. It's going to be a better car. Don't lease another Mach-E. To do that, Ford had to set up an entire skunk works, right? That was the payoff of that structural change inside of Ford. We're going to take a bunch of people, we're going to put them aside, we're going to take them out of the Ford ecosystem, let them rethink the car from the ground up. They also announced a new architecture, they announced a new manufacturing process. That was notably led by a Tesla veteran at Ford. Sterling, you worked at Tesla as well, you're at GM now. Did you need to do anything similar inside of GM's culture to get to your new platform, your new ideas?
Couple of quick comments. So I like Doug a lot. We worked together. I worked with Alan Clark, who's been leading the Skunk Works program for Ford. Both great people. So nothing about that. What I will say is I've seen a fairly oscillatory behavior from some OEMs when it comes to EVs, right? In one moment, it's we'll force an electric powertrain into an ICE platform, and we'll end up with a fairly compromised product as a result that turns people off to certain segments, right? Battery electric trucks. There's some things that just weren't great about the way that started in some of this space. And then I see a pendulum swing all the way to it's got to be Skunk Works project. It's going to be done, fully independently from a clean sheet, and then we're going to somehow try to ingest it into the broader organization. That ingestion is where the risk lies. I think what I've seen that General Motors has been doing since before, I only got here 4 months ago, so there's only so much that you can attribute at all to me at this point. But what I'll say is General Motors has taken a much more steady approach to this development. Electric vehicles designed and developed and manufactured on electric vehicle architectures, which are not nearly as compromised. A focus on the cost basis for these vehicles, on what are the value-added components that we can put in them, and what are the things that just don't add that value that we can strip out and kind of refine. Whether it's reduction in menial stuff like spot welds, right? So some of our next generation platforms, dramatic reduction in those, you'll never see those. You'll never hear about them, but they drive an enormous cost. I think at one point the estimate was $40,000 per spot weld if you amortize kind of all the costs of the robots and everything else across it. But to the battery chemistry and some of the battery innovations, I think you may be aware that we've been pioneering. We are today the largest manufacturer of cells in North America. This is larger than Tesla today. We have been pioneering work in lithium manganese rich, or LMR, battery chemistry that has something closer to the energy density of high nickel batteries that you're familiar with, at closer to the cost of lithium iron phosphate, or LFP. So a lot of and those will come to market first in GM vehicles, in some of our larger vehicles in 2028. So what we've done is oriented the company in some of this kind of the functional strength that Mary references in common design, common engineering, to innovate on many of the foundational enablers of compelling battery electric platforms done through the streamlined kind of process that we have for our global product development across the company. So my expectation is, when this hits, as LMR hits, as our architectures hit, as our manufacturing improvements hit, as some of our robotics work that we can talk about hits, what you'll see is those immediately kick in, and what's done initially in one model, in one plant, in one brand, rapidly scales across a massive portfolio of vehicles. So I think that the leverage that we realize by doing this, much, much higher than what we could do if it were an isolated effort. Nothing against isolated efforts. That's sometimes the thing that you have to do to really move the needle on something. But I'm really impressed by what the company's been doing since well before I joined. But we're certainly moving that forward. And we can talk about some of the ways in some of our electric architecture. Mary referenced a little bit about what we're doing there around software-defined vehicles. But there's a lot of work to come. But yeah, I guess the core story is, I think we leverage our scale and we leverage our people best when we do this through a streamlined process that's part of the company.
And if I could just add, and I totally agree with everything Sterling said, and I'm glad that that's the way you feel, as you are now here for going, I think, 4.5 months.
That's right. Yeah.
But our goal was, let's get the right people in the right functions. And so we've brought in, from a software perspective, we've brought in a tremendous amount of talent from Silicon Valley, big and small companies, the Mag 7, et cetera. When we started to look at it and we said, okay, from a battery perspective, bringing in someone with Kurt Kelty, who has worked his whole career in batteries, and then he came and went, oh my gosh, you've got the capability to do not only core R&D, so when you have a promising startup, you can take that into one of our R&D centers and really see if it's going to scale and it's manufacturable, to actually being able to work on process improvements, because you need all of that to get the cost out of the battery to get EVs profitable. And then there's a lot of learnings that flows back in from a software perspective. It doesn't matter what the propulsion system is. And so our strategy has been to get the right and the best talent in and make them part of the team. And so, like you said, it's across the board.
You're kind of describing really long-term bets, right? I mean, battery chemistry is one of those things where you start on the battery chemistry journey and hopefully it pays off, and that's a step change in the car. Autonomy is one of those things. I'm actually very curious, Mary, you described bringing in startups and seeing if they'll scale, right? That was Cruise. It didn't work out, but we're here to talk about eyes-free Super Cruise, and that bet paid off. Well, so as you think about all of that,
Nilay, if I could say about what I would say about Cruise is, there's a tremendous amount of Cruise talent that's still here. As we looked at what it was going to take, I mean, I think everyone, I remember back in 2016, I made the prediction we would have, an autonomous vehicle by 19. It really was a couple years later that we had that. I think you've seen the whole industry, whether you're a tech company or an OEM, realize it's a pretty significant challenge. I think we're closer today, but as we made that change and as we continue to see progress, we looked at it and said, as we want to deploy capital, where do we want to do that? And do we really want to put all that capital into all the vehicles for rideshare when our business today isn't rideshare 1.0? It's not taxis. It's not rental cars. And so we made a strategic decision to focus that talent and to have them work closely with with engineer and technical talent within General Motors to be able to focus and be in a leading position from personal autonomy. And that's what we're focused on now. And, Sterling coming in, who's got great experience from knowing the car industry from his time at Tesla. And then most recently, the only trucking company that has autonomous trucks on the road. Again, I think that represents somebody who brings in that expertise that I think is going to help us continue to be on the forefront and lead with these technologies. So from a Cruise perspective, we did pivot away from robotaxi, but I would say there's a lot of core assets that we're attributing to our personal autonomy journey from an overall autonomy perspective.
Let me ask you the other Decoder question, and then I want to put all this into practice against the announcements that you guys are making, because it all ties together. So this is the other Decoder question I ask everybody. How do you make decisions? What's your framework for making decisions? You've obviously made a lot at GM. How do you organize that process?
Well, a lot of the decisions we make are complex. And so one of the things I like to leverage is the senior leadership team. There's 9 people that are core to the company that lead all the functions. Sterling is on that team as our chief product officer, along with a few others. And we look at trends both inside and outside our industry. We look at what's happening with technology. We're very focused on where the consumer is. Of course, we benchmark where the competition is, but then we also look and try to say, where is the consumer going? And I think there's been many times we have found white space in even vehicle segments. When we first put the Buick Encore out, no one thought, they were like, no one's going to buy it. That segment now has grown for us to 4 vehicles and is profitable and growing, and we can't build enough of those vehicles. And so that's just one example, but it's really getting the team together and understanding where is the consumer going? Where is technology going? And then what is the roadmap we're going to put forward? I would also tell you, though, it used to be, I would say 5-7 years ago, we would put the portfolio together, and usually it was an annual event. I would say it's a more frequent event now as we continue to take new learnings and make adjustments, because the minute you have new information, you just don't want momentum to put a program forward. You want to pivot and make the change to make sure you're going to be relevant going forward. But I would say my decision making is largely based, let's look at it as a team, different experiences, different skills, and I think together we get to better solutions and a better strategy.
So let me put that into practice. The big announcement that I'm really curious about is Gemini-powered assistant in the car. That's coming obviously in 2026. That's, I would say, an expansion of the idea that GM should have a software platform in its cars, right? That we're running Android Automotive in the cars. There's an app platform. There's a data platform. There's Google Assistant in my car. My daughter loves asking it to play Taylor Swift. That's basically all we use that platform for today because she won't let us do anything else. But it works. It's there. The big decision there, and I know you know this question is coming, is that you bet against putting smartphone projection in your EVs. There's no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto in the EVs, but the gas cars still have it. How did you make that decision?
Well, I think it's really a question of timing as we look at that, because really, and I want to make sure that we get Sterling's input on this as well, but as we looked at it and as we made that decision, we were getting a lot of feedback from customers that it was very clunky moving back. It wasn't seamless. And frankly, in some cases could be distracting to move back and forth between if you were doing something that you could do on a phone projection type of system versus if you needed to do something in the vehicle. And we also know that's only going to increase when you look at some of the things we're going to talk about of how we can just make your life better and assist you as we move forward. And I think we're at the very, very early stages of services we can have on a vehicle to improve the overall customer experience and make the journey smoother. And so we looked at that, and we decided that we needed to have a great system in the vehicle that allowed people to have one system, and we're going to continue to make that better and add new features. And Sterling,
I agree with that. Yeah. Nilay, one thing that I'd say here is what we're talking about is the inevitable performance degradation when jumping between S-curves. And what I'll describe as those S-curves is the first one was, for some time, I think you and others got attached to phone projection applications largely because the in-vehicle HMI was pretty bad. Your opportunity for doing some of these things was better when you were using that. We've now gotten to a point where, you're driving a Vistic, I understand. You've got Dolby surround audio. You've got giant screens. You've got giant displays. The analog I would use here is we're on this new S-curve. There is inevitably a jump that has to happen for you to get over to it. That's uncomfortable for many, right? But frankly, it's a very, very Jobsian kind of approach to things, right? And the removal of the disk drive, nobody liked it. Everybody on the forums and Facebook was complaining about it. But it was really look, guys, flash storage really is the future. Get on board, you'll see that. That's kind of what we're saying here. That's exactly what we're saying. In fact, and the analog that I use for folks is, look, you've got if you're talking to me about CarPlay, it's very likely you've certainly got an iPhone. You've probably got a MacBook. You have the opportunity to use phone projection on your MacBook, right? A phone mirroring application. How many of you are accessing online services like email, social media, and otherwise through the phone projection app in your laptop? Almost none of them do. Why? Because you've got a much larger screen on your laptop. You've got a much more convenient HMI via the keyboard. You've got better speakers. Now take that same analog to the car and ask the same question. Is it in a car that has not only just laptop speakers, not only a laptop screen, but something better and that can move you and that can integrate with charging infrastructure, with Super Cruise availability on your maps, all of these other things? You're in a much more immersive environment that can do so many more things. Why would you use the equivalent of a phone mirroring application on a laptop in your car? For us, it's a look, we're taking out the disk drive, guys. Get on board with flash storage. That's where the future is. It's kind of the analog.
Okay, I have a number of responses for you.
All right.
I spent a lot of time hearing from our readers about this specifically.
Sure.
The first thing I will say is most people don't use the phone mirroring app on their laptops because it's not illegal to also use your phone while you're using your laptop, and it is very illegal to use your phone while you're driving your car. So this is the first difference that most of our readers would point to, right? That this thing where I need to see my phone, I need access to all of the applications and data on my phone without relogging in or having multiple user profiles. It's fine with my laptop. It's fine with my iPad. It's not fine in the car because I've the one specific one that sticks in my brain about the library of applications is I'm actually not a huge CarPlay fan, and I complained about it on our other show, and I got this long note from a reader, and he said, "Look, I use between 6 and 8 audio applications on my 3-hour commute, and one of them is just this I believe it was a very niche Bible app, and he's like, they're never going to support this on these other platforms. It's on my phone, and it has a CarPlay extension." And so that's one thing, right? I just want the library of content. Then there's consumers being unable to affect what feels like business dealings at a much higher level. And the example I'll give you there is, yes, my car has Dolby Atmos in it. The number one provider of Atmos tracks in this industry is Apple Music. And Apple Music will not have an app on your phone because I'm confident that Apple wants you to have CarPlay, and that is a business dealing that consumer demand cannot affect. And that's kind of the shape of the puzzle, right?
Yeah. But Nilay, I would say we have a good relationship with Apple. I meet at the most senior level with both with Apple, with Google, with all of the tech companies. We're bringing the wallet. We will be announcing that shortly, that we'll have that and have the ability to do some of the vehicle functions through that. So we're having continual conversations with Apple, and I would say we're talking about the opportunity and looking for win-wins. We also have a very good relationship with Google, and we don't enable Android Auto either. So I would say you're talking about a moment in time versus where the industry is heading from Adobe Atmos and the relationship that we have with Apple. So I wouldn't make some of the broad-based assumptions you're making.
No, I think Do you
think I'm going to get the Apple Music app in my Cadillac?
We don't have anything to share on that right now. But what I will say is your first comment really struck at the HMI, right? The ease of use. And do you have to log into each of these different services and applications in your car? Because if you do, you get some breakage. Some people just will never do that, right? It's a pain. We're looking at that as well. Right? What can we do about federated IDs? What can we do to eliminate that friction of you engaging with your car? I'm not sure I quite follow the whole like it's illegal to use your phone when you're driving and not when you're on your laptop. I think that cuts against your argument a little bit, because if you're sitting with your laptop and your phone,
well, no, I mean,
you don't pick up your phone.
Looking at your phone while you're driving, you get pulled over. If the cops see you looking at your phone while you're using a laptop, I don't think they're going to.
My point being, if you've got your phone on your laptop, or you've got your phone in your car, if you're sitting next to your laptop, you don't typically pick up your phone to answer an email. You'll answer it on your laptop. If you're sitting in your car, you wouldn't pick up your phone to use a map application if it's sitting there on a bigger screen in front of you in the car, right? And if you have a convenient HMI by which to
hold on. Not to get too weedsy, but sure. I know we have a lot of readers who have Windows laptops, for example, and they are constantly picking up their phone to use iMessage on their iPhones. Because that is not an experience that you can project.
Correct. Yeah,
to Windows in a meaningful
way.
Yeah,
and
that's real. That's a thing people do all day long.
And that kind of gets to Mary's point, right? Which is don't count out the don't expect that we won't have a growing list. I mean, today we use Google Automotive Services in these cars. That's got access to the Play Store. Quite a few apps available through that will only grow in time, as will availability of apps from other places.
And I think, overarching, we want to give the consumer a great experience in the car that's not clunky, that allows them to getting to this point of safety that one of your viewers talked about, that you can be the least distracted and pull even more information from the vehicle to improve the way your whole experience overall. So, we're at I'd say the early phase of making that shift and now continuing to add more to it, continuing to make it more intuitive. How do we make, access to more apps and more things you want to leverage? So we're excited about the future that we have coming for what's going to be available in the system we put into the vehicle.
So let me ask you the second part of that question again, because I think it's again, we're talking so much about the future, and I understand the argument about the future you're making. But you still have the smartphone projection in the gas cars. Why is it still in the gas cars?
Well, if you look at it, a lot of it depends is when do you do an update to that vehicle? When you look at the fact that we have over 40 models that we, across our portfolio, you don't just do this and they all update. So I think you'll see as we move forward with each new vehicle and major new vehicle launch, I think you're going to see us consistent on that. We made a decision to prioritize our EV vehicles during this time frame, and as we go forward, we'll continue across the portfolio.
So we should expect new gas cars will not have smartphone projection?
As we get to a major rollout, I think that's the right expectation, yes.
Let's talk about that next rollout. I'm very interested in the fact that you're putting Gemini in the cars. We obviously use Google Assistant in our car today. AI has often been described to me as a platform shift. And in particular, like natural language interface has been described as a major kind of platform shift. And then maybe the way we write applications will change with MCP and these other technologies. But the platform shift is you're going to talk to the computer, it's going to understand it, it's going to take some action for you. Are you feeling that way about the car, that AI and particularly these assistants will let you have a platform shift inside the car?
Yeah, we are. So we're thinking about AI across the business, right? Not just in kind of what it does to the product experience, but what it does to our development of the product, what it does to kind of what we can do to bring to bear the massive data that this company has in our production systems, in our CAD and development systems, to leverage in development of AI for production for the product. As it relates to the product, though, what I'll say is this is one of the really important enablers of speed in a company with a portfolio this broad is development of a common platform or undergirding infrastructure on which we can deploy, including over-the-air software updates. As Mary mentioned, there are some legacy platforms that will kind of work their way out of the portfolio, but one of the things we're working on in the software-defined vehicle space is a new electrical architecture that centralizes all compute in the vehicle. It doesn't just move the compute to zonal aggregators, it centralizes all of it. In the upper trims, it leads to about a 35 times increase in the computational power of these vehicles. It allows for
So this is the announcement. This is the 2028 Escalade IQ, right? It's going to have
it will arrive first on the 28
with
IQ.
massive compute.
That's right.
Yeah.
And what it does is, from a networking perspective, right? It moves to Ethernet-based networking, which allows us to move to sub-millisecond response times, right? Take magnetic suspension systems or dampers as your example. From accelerometer through controller back to actuator, we're talking sub 1 millisecond, right? You're talking 1,000 hertz. That's a 10x improvement over previous electrical architectures. It's a massive, massive opportunity, not only for the dynamics, which I found General Motors is extraordinarily good at, but for the software that we can deploy on this. Because now we've got a centralized architecture. Now we've got a central compute on which we can run a variety of applications, to which we can deploy updates to those applications at a much higher pace than what we do today. And so that flexibility that comes via abstraction of hardware and software with this new electric architecture is really going to be a powerful enabler for us going forward, and something that I'm excited about. So going forward, your questions about why can I get some things on one car and not another, you're going to have far fewer of those because you're going to have a lot more kind of commonality throughout the portfolio based on this platform that separates hardware from software.
Sterling, you and I have talked about, you keep calling it HMI, it's human-machine interface for people who are not total nerds like us. The idea, though, that you will be able to just speak, right? You'll be able to say, hey, Gemini, and you'll just have some natural language conversation with the car. There's a lot of things you could do with that. There's also a lot of questions about how well that might work. Even today, as expressed in ChatGPT and Gemini itself, a lot of questions about how those things might fundamentally operate. What kinds of applications might we build? How reliable will they be? How much how many hallucinations might we have? Is that going to be enabled by your new architecture too, or are you going to send all of that to the cloud?
There are a number of things that we're going to infer directly on the vehicle. And we've got quite a bit of, as I mentioned, the computational power is there for us to do a lot of on-vehicle inference. What I'll say, though, is step one, what you're referencing is in the Gemini-based conversational AI work that we're going to release next year. That's really about kind of vocal interaction, voice-based interaction with your car. It's about asking about your destination. It's about asking about a number of other things where it can give you kind of contextual responses. I think you're hitting at the heart but many elements of the car, if you're going to directly control them, are safety critical. And how can you deal with the kind of accuracy that you get out of an untailored LLM if you're giving it direct access to those things? And the short answer is we're not. We are developing, in addition to the contextual AI that comes out next year, a more powerful, specifically tailored AI that will learn from not just your preferences and not just the data that you have available via a variety of other mechanisms, but it will be specifically tailored, customized, and learn from the vehicle itself, its functions. It will have specific access to specific functions. It will have other controls in place that a generic LLM doesn't have. So I think that the value of these large models oftentimes can be realized in much greater effect through tailoring and fine-tuning for specific application areas, and that's what we're going into post the Gemini conversational AI work.
At General Motors, we always prioritize safety. We were the first to have a driver assistance technology out with Super Cruise, but we very much prioritized the safety of that and enabled different features as we saw it demonstrate that it could meet the safety standards that we have. I think that's what Sterling's talking about now is as we do this, we won't just go wide open, but we'll make sure that the integrity of the safety systems are there.
That's right. And to your local versus cloud, if it's controlling a temporally sensitive or safety relevant function, it will happen locally.
One of the reasons I'm asking about that very specifically is I'm watching your partner, Google. I'm watching Amazon. I'm watching Apple. They control a lot of that stack, right? They control the LLMs. They control the inference. They control the smart home platforms. And they have not been able to connect those assistants in the way that you're describing, right? Alexa Plus exists, and it has to fall back on some complicated deterministic system to flip lights up and down, and they have to do some orchestration. Google Home, they're doing the same thing over there. Gemini is rolling out, and it has to fall back. And it's working however it works. Apple has not been able to ship this product, which they have promised people. How have you solved that problem inside the car where you definitely can't get it wrong? Right, I say, hey, Google, turn off the lights. By the way, my Google's going to turn off the lights, so I shouldn't say that. But if I ask my assistant here to turn off the lights and it doesn't happen, maybe the worst outcome is my wife is once again annoyed at me for trying to voice activate our home, right? If I get that wrong in the car, like many other things can go wrong.
That's right. 100%. This is something that we are very keen on, right? Whether it's the development of our self-driving system, where we are acutely familiar with and aware of the challenges that arise when you have a kind of monolithic end-to-end system about which you can't make any strong guarantees, to other controls across the car that are safety relevant. So, as I said, that's probably a much longer conversation than we have time for here. But this becomes architecturally relevant in the design of our self-driving system. It's architecturally relevant in the design of the rest of our AI and how it interfaces with vehicle controls. And we are taking that very carefully.
And we have a safety group within the company that really looks at that and is looking at all those decisions are made because they can think through second order, third order, down the road of really thinking through to make sure that we've interrogated it to make sure we're making good decisions and we're not going to put the driver or the passengers into a situation that no one wants to be in.
I actually have a call-in question from Joanna Stern. She let me do a call-in question on her episode, and it tracks here. So I'm gonna play this for you from Joanna.
Hi, Mary. It's Joanna Stern here. As you may have heard, my lease on my Ford Mach-E is up in August 2026. If I buy a Chevy Equinox when the lease is up, will I be able to chat with Gemini in the car?
So what she's asking is if she buys one with Google Assistant in it today, will that get upgraded to Gemini?
I personally don't know the exact rollout plan, so I'd say let me email me and we can talk to you about that. I don't know what our rollout is, and I don't know what we've released yet. This isn't one of those situations, so I don't know, Sterling, if you know, but I know we haven't made it public yet, so we'll get back to you. But you'll be among the first to know.
Yeah, I'm very curious. I mean, I obviously want the upgrade in my car as well. So when we were discussing the call-in, I was like, you should ask that because she is very much in the market for a new car. So if you can sell her one, because she likes talking to ChatGPT in the car. This is my other question. Why pick Gemini? When you evaluate all the universe of partners, obviously ChatGPT, OpenAI, huge consumer market share. Google obviously is very capable. You already have the partnership. Was it as simple as we already have the partnership, or did you do the full evaluation?
I think the team did the full evaluation. And as we looked at what we needed to do, clearly they've been a good partner to us, but it was a full evaluation.
When you think about the long-term future, right, you're also announcing a robotics division, you're announcing batteries in the home, you're announcing eyes-free driving, level 3 autonomy in the 28 Escalade. That's a big shape of how we will interact with cars. Right, you're going to get to the house. Your car will be part of your energy system in your house. You'll have robotics that will let you take the technologies you're building for autonomy and AI in the car and put them in your house. That's a pretty tight integration of how people feel about their cars today and how people feel about the things in their home. And somewhere in there is what is the next generation of devices. Right, this is like the big question that's animating the tech industry around me. How are we going to graduate from our phones? You've obviously made a big bet, right? We're going to graduate from our phones in the car, and the car is going to be a big part of that platform. But then you got to go in the house, and there's going to be a GM robot. There's going to be a GM power supply. How are you thinking about that extension as the rest of the industry grapples with what happens after the phone?
Well, we already have quite an extensive offering from a GM Energy perspective, and then the ability that your vehicle can actually power your home and power outages. So that's something we're continuing to work to make that vehicle work even harder for the owner. Beyond when we talk about robotics, there's a lot that's a broad term, and I'm sitting here speaking to someone who has his PhD in robotics, so I probably should turn it over to him. But when we look at what we're doing on the factory floor with a cobot that is able to take over and do things that create safety issues for our team members or create ergonomics issues or get rid of what non-value added activities that makes everyone more efficient. But that learning and what we're doing, I think, is something that we can look at for broader application. But I would say, start when we look at it from that perspective, and we already look at at what we're doing from a GM Energy perspective for the home, I think there's a lot of potential as we move forward. And Sterling, what would you like to add?
Yeah. The only thing I'll add is we are focused on growth areas that are both tangential to and kind of synergistic with our core business. When you say batteries and energy storage, we've recently announced a partnership with Redwood Materials, for instance, where our second life batteries are currently powering the largest second use energy storage system in the world. The largest microgrid in North America in Sparks, Nevada. It's 63 megawatt hours, I think I remember that being. So there's tremendous opportunity there. When we talk about kind of grid rebalancing, particularly as we move into LMR, which has much higher cycle life, we get into a world where by parking your car, by plugging your car in when it's at home or your place of work, your car can be an active participant in the rebalancing of the grid, right? Pulling power from in lulls and pushing power to in at peak times. This is an enormous opportunity for the industry. It's an enormous opportunity for kind of, energy is going to be a very constrained resource. If the last several months of discussion in the AI space has taught us nothing, I mean, we're talking about a triple kind of the capacity needed online. We can play a pretty big role in that. As the largest cell manufacturer in the United States, there's a lot we can be doing there. In robotics, I'll just kind of paint the picture for a moment, particularly in a world of learned models, right, which is effectively where AI is taking us. Data is really important, right? And the quantity of data, the cleanliness of that data, the availability of that data in training systems that can take on more tasks than what they've ever done before. Look at a business like General Motors, and you see a product, each of whose parts is known in detail. It's sitting in CAD. We know the mass, we know the materials, we know the response to manipulation. We know the flows of that material through a production system. We know what happens at each step of the production system. Every single step is meticulously outlined in work instructions. That is an enormous kind of database from which to develop really competent physical AI systems, right? Embodied AI systems that can be powerful enablers both of our own production and the safety of our employees. So today we got, I think, 30,000 robots operating alongside on the order of 97,000 production associates in 11 facilities. These, you think of automotive robots and you're probably thinking of giant arms that sit in cages with e-stops on the outside that can't operate in and around humans because they're just simply not designed for it. We're developing autonomous mobile robots that move materials through our factories. We've started deploying those. We're developing cobots or collaborative robotic systems that can operate alongside associates that are currently in our factories and are scaling up, that can, for instance, manipulate and bring a part to the line to hand it to a kind of worker, hold it in place for that worker to shoot some the bolts. So there's tremendous opportunity for us to build that not only for our own use, it improves the safety, the efficiency, the throughput of our own business, but to expand that to our supply base, to increase our competitive moat, and then ultimately to productize it and commercialize it for others in the kind of industrial automation space. So we're looking at a number of things.
Can I cut to the consumer dream for 1 second? It's a pretty small, at least in my head, it is a small jump from we have an AI-enabled robot that can bring a factory worker bolts to I have a robot in my house that can bring me a beer, right? Like the kind of manipulation you're describing actually has a pretty massive general purpose application. Are you thinking that far ahead?
Well, I would say we think of a lot of things. I mean, one of the things at General Motors, we're constantly innovating. As I mentioned, we were just in design and looking at, what the future holds of what we can bring forward. I think we continue to imagine what the applications can be, but not making any commitments or announcements today. But, we recognize, as Sterling said, the amount of information that we have and the very complex work that is done today in our factories and what we can do to better support our team members. So I think there's a whole new world that is in front of us, an opportunity for us as we move forward.
You've described a lot of things that a lot of other companies are doing. Obviously, Tesla does a lot of these same things. They've pushed really far ahead with what they refer to as full self-driving. They're demoing Optimus. However well Optimus works or does not work, unknown. The difference in culture is stark, right? I can just identify the difference in culture. They are less worried about safety. Elon Musk is less worried about the safety of full self-driving than Mary is about Super Cruise on the highways, right? It's just obvious. They're less worried about making promises that they might not be able to keep with Optimus. In many ways, this is to GM's credit. I think I hope more car companies are worried about safety. But in many ways, it has contributed to the perception that Tesla is vastly ahead. Do you think about that balance? Because that is, if I had to just identify the cultural difference, and Sterling, I'm curious, since you've worked at both places, if I had to just identify the cultural difference, that would be it.
Well, I would say I've been at this company for over 40 years, and it's existed for well over 100. And I would say safety is an overriding priority. Safety of our workforce, not just for injury, but also preventative from an ergonomic perspective. We are committed to, and I'm very proud that we have an industry-leading record, and it translates into safety of our vehicles. And I probably get 3 or 4 letters a week from someone sending me a picture of them, and they'll send me a picture of the vehicle that is somewhat unrecognizable, and I can tell you many of them, they walked away with just a scratch. I've had letters sent to me from people in a hospital bed thanking me and say, I will be buying a General Motors vehicle for the rest of my life because I know what you do in design into safety. And so we have the highest loyalty scores from a manufacturer perspective or from a car company perspective for our consumers. So I think safety is not just a kind of a cultural perspective, it is a commitment to our customer. Now, as we look and we go forward, how do we deliver that safety and how do we do it more efficiently? We're always looking for ways that we can be better, but I think it's a very important of the promise. And if you read half of the letters that I get from our consumers and you look and see what they walked away from, I think it would be something that motivates you every day to continue to deliver on that promise.
Do you ever perceive that it's holding you back?
No, I perceive it as serving the customer. Now, and so we'll look at decisions we're making, but also we have we all have a regulator with NHTSA, but we look at that and we are very forthright and transparent because we want them to know what we're working on, what we're looking at, and again, they're our regulator. But I think having that so they understand how we look at safety for the long term is going to pay dividends, and I think it's going to pay dividends for the consumer. So I don't think it holds us back. I think it keeps us focused on what's really important. Time will tell, but I'm proud of our safety record, and I'm proud of what our customers say. Yeah. And you've seen it. You see it from a different perspective. So please,
Nilay, if the stereotypical view that I think has been expressed of a traditional automaker super focused on safety might suggest we are sitting still and just putting out vehicles with great airbags, seatbelts, and crumple zones, right? And we're good with that. I think the reality is far different for GM. Our customers have driven over 700 million hands-free miles with Super Cruise without a single accident attributed to the technology. Right. I led autopilot. You can't say that for autopilot. I think this is a long-term play, right? We build trust with customers by delivering safe products. Look at in the autonomy space. Look at every company that's had a major incident that could be attributed to that company. How'd it go for them afterwards? Right? They might have gotten there quicker, but it didn't go well. Once the public lost trust. We have earned that. We'll retain it, and we're going to build on it. And so the work that we're doing in, whether it be it autonomy, be it robotics, be it a number of other areas, I think this caricature of a traditional OEM doesn't fit. This caricature of bubble-wrapped vehicles that aren't innovating, it just doesn't work. Right, the number of bets that we're making, that Mary's made. I mean, Mary, years ago, when I was in the autonomy space, I watched her make the investment in Cruise. I watched her kind of lead that to a place where Cruise was, the first to deploy commercially in a densely urban setting. I think the reality of what GM has done simply doesn't match the caricature.
All right, I have one very, very small feature request, but it's very important to me. The buttons that control the seat memory on the door in my Cadillac Vistic do not also switch the user profiles on the infotainment system. So when I get in the car, I need to push the button to move my seat to my seat memory and switch the profile from my wife's profile to my profile. And I have no idea why I have to do both. I just want to be able to push the seat memory button and have that switch the profile as well. Can you fix that for me?
It can't possibly be. Let me take a look. These are different systems. Yeah.
And also what it would take to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll look at both. We are open to customer feedback, and we love the fact that you're driving a Vistic.
I'd like to thank Mary Barra and Sterling Anderson for taking the time to speak with me, and thank you for listening. If you'd like to let us know what you thought about this episode, or really anything else at all, you can drop us a line. Email us at decoder@theverge.com. If you like Decoder, please share it with your friends and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Decoder is a production of The Verge and part of the Vox Media Podcast Network. We'll see you next week.